T 細胞阻住阿姐睇電視。
你哋呢班賊仔啊，想偷嘢啊？
Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Green Wall. It's been a while since I recorded in front of this. I'm actually homesick today. And we're talking about Magic Crystal Hell. Yes, this is the Vinegar Syndrome release. Look at this slipcase. It just comes out the bottom. Like the whole thing is all sealed off and hard. This is a really nice case. So if you are new to the channel, welcome and thanks for finding us. I hope you like Blu-rays. I hope you like boutique labels. I hope you like 80s movies. I hope you like martial arts movies. I hope you like Wong Jing movies and Andy Lau and Cynthia Rothrock and all that other fun stuff. And if you do like those things and you feel like subscribing, it would be much appreciated. Obviously, no pressure. Let us know in the comments what you think about this movie and what you think about Vinegar Syndrome and their recent Hong Kong releases and all that other fun stuff. And a huge shout out to our patrons. This is going to be a Patreon early release video. And actually, everyone who is watching on YouTube, you should go in the comments and thank the people in Patreon that you are seeing my review of this film, because I was going to do this as a Patreon exclusive because I bought this with Patreon money. And I put up a poll in Patreon just asking, like, do the people in here have any opinions on this? Like, would you rather I do this as an exclusive or an early release video? And like literally everyone who voted on it said, do it as an early release. Like, it's fine if it goes up on YouTube as long as we can see it first. So you have the kindness of the people in Patreon to thank for seeing this video. So this film came out in 1986. So as I said, I'm having a sick day today. I watched this movie yesterday, which was my first sick day. I've had 2 in a row, so I really haven't been feeling well, but I'm starting to feel a little bit better. As you can tell, my energy is a little bit up from my last video, but what was I going to say? Sick day. This was like the absolute freaking perfect movie to watch on a sick day. Like, it was so fun. It was the perfect medicine. It really was. I watched 3 movies from 1986 yesterday, totally by coincidence. I watched this movie, From Beyond, and Chopping Mall. They were all freaking awesome. They were all perfect medicine. I had a really good day yesterday. It was really nice to take some time off of work. So this came out the 17th of September, 1986, and it ran until the 30th of June, 1986. This release came out in October of 2023. It's a Vinegar Syndrome archive release. I don't know enough about Vinegar Syndrome to know how that differs from their regular releases, so do let me know in the comments if you know the difference there. It was written and directed by Wong Jing. It stars Andy Lau, Max Mock, Cynthia Rothrock. Wong Jing is also in it. Xing Fui-on is in this film. Chung Fa, Charlotte Chung, Richard Norton, Shi Qin, who's in like a billion movies, who's an absolute legend of Hong Kong cinema. Natalis Chan, who is freaking hysterical in this movie. Sui Bon, who plays the little kid. That's a pretty good overview of the cast. And so I'll give you the plot in a nutshell. I'll show you the physical release. I'll give you like a really quick hit review, even though I already did that. And I just said it was like the perfect medicine and it was a super fun movie. The formula that I came up with while I was watching this movie is it's like E.T. as an 80s James Bond movie, as written and directed by Wong Jing. That's like the best way I can describe it. There is some Indiana Jones influence in this movie that is very prominent in certain sections of the film. So it's very Spielbergian in general. I would say it takes heavier influence from E.T. And I would also say that because it's a contemporary film, like it's set in the 1980s, it is contemporary to its own time period. And because it's like this kind of globe-trotting film with like contemporary technology and like they go to Greece and all this stuff, right? It feels to me a lot more like a Bond film than it feels like an Indiana Jones film, because it's not a period piece film. And even though it has archaeology elements in it, it's not like rooted in this kind of world of archaeology and stuff like that. It's more like spies and agents and Interpol and cops and like stuff like that. So it felt to me more like a Bond film. But I enjoyed the shit out of it. I mean, I was a kid in the 80s. Obviously, like movies like E.T. and the Indiana Jones films are movies that I grew up watching and just absolutely loved. And like also like, you know, I mean, so many 80s movies were so important to my childhood, right? And so this hits all those nostalgia buttons. It's got great fights in it. It's got really interesting kind of story, mythology. It's just a very successful film in my mind. One of the notes that I wrote down while I was watching the movie is that like this is a genuinely good movie. It's not just like, you know, an entertaining martial arts film or a silly little romp or like a pervy Wong Jing comedy. Like, it is a genuinely good movie with a really solid arc, really engaging mythology, really great characters and character dynamics and relationships, a really strong villain, a really fascinating world. Like, it's a genuinely good film. So to show you the physical release, here is the front. Here is the back. And I said I would tell you the plot of the film too. So let's get into that. So Andy Lau plays this guy who's like kind of like a mercenary, but he works for the Hong Kong police. So he's like a special agent and they send him on missions. And he has a friend who is an archaeologist who asks him to come to Athens in Greece because he says like the KGB are after him, Interpol's after him. He's discovered this object and everyone's trying to get him. So he goes to Greece. Cynthia Rothrock and Max Mock play Interpol agents. Wong Jing plays Andy Lau's like partner and buddy. The little kid is Andy Lau's nephew. And then the archaeology dude goes missing and the object goes missing and Richard Norton plays the KGB agent and like everyone is trying to get this object, right? And the object turns out to be the magic crystal of the title. And that's where the ET thing comes in because the magic crystal is actually like this sentient being and it forms a bond with this little kid. So you very much have this ET element of like kids bonding with this being that's not human and all of these government agents like trying to get it and the kid like having this special emotional relationship with it and trying to protect it and like so it has that 80s movie like kid adventure like the Goonies like ET type of element to it. Here's what we get when we pull out the case. Amazing artwork here by Tony Stella, which I absolutely love. There's Richard Norton playing the KGB villain at the top there. And here's the back. And I mean, as always with Vinegar Syndrome releases, like the artwork is freaking incredible. Like the slipcase is extremely well manufactured and printed. And like they obviously put a lot of effort into the physical release. And then it is a reversible. Can you see that? Yeah, I'm getting a lot of glare. Sorry. I'm like, it's a very bright room, which is good for the video because you'll be able to see me. I'm not recording in the van in the darkness of the parking garage today, but we do get a lot of glare because of all the light. So there's a poster here, which is actually pretty darn big. I mean, it's not gigantic, but like it's a decent sized poster that you could like put up and frame. There we go. So there is an essay in here in the booklet. Should I smell the paper? I think I'll probably smell the paper. Oh, I love it. I love the smell of paper. I know it's weird. So Erica Schultz wrote this, Raiders of the American Blockbusters. So this is a really interesting essay because it goes through basically like the entire, whatever you want to call it, Indiana Jones exploitation subgenre of like, obviously there's movies like Armor of God, right? Seventh Curse is another Hong Kong movie that has big Indiana Jones influence. Mortuary Blues is a movie that I loved, which I've reviewed on the channel that has big Indiana Jones influence. This is Natalis Chandu. This guy freaking cracks me up. He's in The Last Blood too. He is so funny. It's a Wong Jing regular. So this movie, or this essay rather, mentions like a buttload of movies I have never heard of before, and so because of that, it's a very valuable essay, and I think it's really interesting kind of look at that world and that kind of movement in the history of global cinema. I would argue it's. Here's the thing. I'm really happy this essay is here. It's well written and it's very knowledgeable and it knows a lot more about that stuff than I do. So I'm happy I read it and I learned a lot from it. I do think it's a little bit of a one-dimensional look at this film, right? Because if you look at movies like The Seventh Curse, right? The Seventh Curse, yes, it is ripping off Indiana Jones to some degree, but it is also very much in keeping with this tradition of films from Hong Kong that are looking at black magic in Southeast Asia, right? Like Black Magic 2, Oily Maniac, Boxer's Omen, like there's so many of those movies, right? Like there's the Holy Virgin and the Evil Dead, the Donnie Yen movie, which was awesome. I freaking love that movie, right? But that's like a whole subgenre of films, right? So it's taking Indiana Jones, it's taking that, it's putting those together. This movie, like I said, really reminded me more of James Bond, even though it has heavy Indiana Jones influence. And it also reminded me a lot of E.T. So there's a lot of Spielberg going on there too. So I really liked the essay, but I do think that to just lump this movie in with Indiana Jones exploitation films is a little bit of a one-dimensional view of it. That is not the fault of the author, I should say. That's just the angle that she took looking at this film, being like, what's interesting about this movie? What can I write about it? I don't know. I mean, maybe if I were to put this out on my own label, which I don't have, so I can't do. Sorry, I had to adjust my seating and I kicked the freaking tripod. Anyway, it's casual. We're friends. We're just hanging out talking about movies, right? We don't have to edit that out. I might include like one more essay to give like a little bit more of a view of the film, but it's really interesting, and I'm not knocking it. I'm not trying to knock the author or the people who decided to include that on here. So let me get deeper into my thoughts. Like I said, I think this is a really good film. One of the things that Wong Jing does in this film that really impresses me is that he doesn't just take cosmetic influence from Steven Spielberg. He takes the core of what makes Spielberg great, which I think is really kind of two things. Well, maybe three things. Spielberg is fantastic at character and emotion and creating this childlike sense of wonder and making you believe in things that maybe you don't believe in anymore as like a cynical adult, right? And bringing the world of children to life in this way that feels very real to that sense of childhood imagination and the world being like this place of great possibilities and magical things can happen and stuff like that. And that's all rooted, I think, in his greatness with character and emotion. So that's the first thing I think Spielberg does incredibly well. Second thing is he's just a freaking ridiculously incredible filmmaker, like one of the greatest blockers and shooters, conceivers, whatever, of cinematic space ever in the history of the medium. Wong Jing actually has some really great camera movement, blocking, like small stuff that's not really ostentatious, but done really well. Like there's the opening kind of camera shot in the movie is there's four people sitting at a table. And the camera shows you all four people, right? And then it pushes in slowly and turns so that you get like a shot of like a full-on face shot of one of the people talking. And then that sets up your scene so you can cut into other shots of people talking. So you have this nice, smooth movement of like this organic sense of the space and the dynamics of these people. And then you kind of settle and are able to cut between the faces so you get like the human emotions and reactions that you want as a person watching a film, right? There's a really cool shot where the camera is on a car that's a POV shot. So like the car is driving and the camera is the POV of the guy in the back seat, and then it cuts to the guy in the back seat from somebody else's POV. So again, you're like a really interesting dynamic shot bringing you into a scene and then cutting into a more established rhythm of like medium close-ups or whatever, right? And there's a lot of stuff throughout this film where I think he does a really good job as a filmmaker. I think the script is really well written. It's a very tight film. It's a really good setup and payoff, like really good character relationships. Like I said, this is a genuinely good movie. And it like I've since I watched Prince Charming, which is a Wong Jing film that came out in 1984 that I freaking loved. It's a romantic comedy that he wrote and directed. But since I watched that movie, I've been really impressed with Wong Jing's ability as a writer. It feels like Wong Jing is sitting down and writing an actual script. I don't know if that's true, but what a lot of people say about Hong Kong cinema is you'll show up on the set and there's like a single 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with bullet points on it. And you're like, that's the script. That's the movie. We're going to improvise. We're going to make up the scenes as we go along and stuff like that. Wong Jing's movies are so tightly scripted that and like the setup and payoff is so good and all the pieces are so perfectly arranged and all the comedic setups are so well put together that it really does feel like someone sat down and wrote it. It doesn't feel as much like something that was kind of improvised as the movie was going along. I don't know if that's true, but I just think he's someone who's famous for being like really pervy and goofy and silly and having this insane sense of imagination that's really unique and original. But I don't often hear people saying like, oh, he's a really good writer. And in terms of the mechanics of cinematic storytelling, he's a really good writer. He's like, this is like a very impressively well put together film. Like, I think he's a very good writer and filmmaker, and I just want to give him a shout out for that. Like I said, I just think this is a genuinely really good film. I like the mythology of the world a lot, and the way the mythology keeps developing throughout the film. And then you get this great climactic scene that brings all the characters together, that gives you a really powerful, like, emotional arc. I think the stuff with the kid is really well handled. Like, you have a lot of really goofy humor in this film, which I'll talk about in a second. But the stuff with the kid is really solidly emotional and meaningful. And, like, it's a really poignant and sweet portrayal of, like, childhood innocence and friendship and stuff like that. And it's handled really, and it comes to a really great conclusion. Like, the end of this film is fantastic. And it really ties everything together really nicely. The fights are in this movie. This is something that everyone says about this movie. The fighting in this movie is freaking incredible. And there's a lot of it. And it's really innovative. It's shot really well. It's chaotic. It's violent. It's fast. It's crisp. But it's not bloody, right? Like, this is definitely a PG-13 movie. Like, it has pervy, like, 80s style jokes of, like, dudes being pervs, right? And, like, women walking around in bikinis and stuff like that. And it has, like, lots of fighting in it, but it's not bloody. It's not super menacing, even though the bad guys are bad. Like, this is very much like a PG-13 style, like, movie, sort of this for, like, older kids, like, whatever, 8, 9, 10-year-olds kind of thing. Like, if I had seen this movie when I was a kid, I would have freaking loved this movie, because it's like, it's a little bit edgy. Like, you'd know as a kid, like, this is maybe a little too violent or adult for me in places, but it's also really sweet and emotional and has, like, a good message and a good heart. And so it's like, you know what? It's like that kind of movie. The boss man character, who's Natalie Chan, is just, there's a couple moments in this film with him where I was just laughing out loud. Like, there's a scene where his hands and feet get switched. I don't want to, like, spoil anything for you. It is hysterical. And, like, the way he deals with that is so funny. And then there's a point at which he thinks he can control people's minds and he tries to rob a bank. It's just like, it's really funny. And one of the things that, so there's a commentary on here with this is really exciting, actually, Frank Chang and Rick Myers. Rick Myers hasn't done a commentary in freaking forever, right? So the two of them do a commentary together. And one of the things they talk about in the commentary is that, and Frank Chang points this out, Wong Jing is like, he wants people to be entertained, right? So even though he's like a really great filmmaker and writer and stuff like that, he's not afraid to stop the forward movement of the film for a joke if he thinks that it's going to add value for the audience for the film. So there's like a lot of kind of scenes in this movie that are silly, that are not necessarily part of the forward momentum of the story, although they do add to like character and world and stuff like that. And I would argue there are no wasted scenes in this film. Like, sometimes in films that have a lot of comedy detours, there are scenes where you're like, you take that out, it won't make any difference, the movie will be better for it. I don't think that's true of this movie. I think it does a really good job of like having just the right amount of ridiculous comedy asides, but that character is just freaking hysterical, and he cracked me up the whole time. And this is just something else. Oh, and there's great music in this movie. There's a scene of Wong Jing taking a dump that is hysterical if you like that type of humor. The Andy Lau character intro is freaking amazing and so 80s. He is in a gym in like a tank top and like little shorts, and then he gets a call on his big brick cell phone. It's hysterical and amazing. The music is fucking fantastic and so 80s. And this movie is just so 80s in general, because you have like Soviet villains, you have this Spielbergian sense of wonder, you have like this kind of James Bond globetrotting thing where like everyone's using like up-to-date technology and wearing very current fashion and driving very current cars, and like everything looks super 80s. It's awesome. It's a very 80s film. So I think that's a pretty good over. I mean, I just enjoyed the shit out of this movie. Like, that's basically, I'm like breaking down why I enjoyed it, but the bottom line is I enjoyed the shit out of this movie. So the bonus material, there's an 18-minute interview with Cynthia Rothrock. She talks about how she was shooting Righting Wrongs, and they offered her this movie, and she thought she wouldn't be able to do it because it wasn't the same company she had her contract with. But then they were like, no, it's okay, go and do it. So they actually stopped shooting Righting Wrongs so she could go to Greece for 10 days. Or maybe they shot other stuff. They stopped shooting her parts of it or whatever. She went to Greece for 10 days, shot for 10 days straight for this movie, and then came back to Hong Kong and started doing Righting Wrongs and was going back and forth between the two films. It was really interesting. This movie was shot Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Greece. So they were kind of going all over the place for it. She blew out her knee in one scene, and she talks about how she did that and how she kind of covered up for it while she was doing the scenes. She said she was really attracted to this film because of the sci-fi elements, and she had like never done anything like that before, so she thought it was really interesting. And then there's a 7.5-minute interview with the kid who plays Bon Bon in the film, who's the little kid in the movie. And this is just fun because it's like his reminiscences of being a child and like being in a movie and being around these superstars like Andy Lau, right? And he talks about how like Andy Lau really impressed him because he was like doing all his own stunts and he was like super macho, and like him and Max Mox would like do all these crazy stunts, and then then they would like go and try to pick up women together in Greece. Like they would go up to women and like ask them for their number and stuff like that. And he says that I thought was really funny. The police would come. They had no permits to shoot in Greece. This is what Cynthia Rothrock says. So the Bon Bon guy says the police police would come and like demand money. They would basically like extort them and be like, pay us or we'll shut you down. And Andy Lau wanted to fight them. He like tried to fight Greek police officers. Then apparently Wong Jing was really chill, and he would like take people out to dinner and buy them drinks and like be really nice to everybody and like charm everyone and like create this really great familial ambiance. But it's just really fun to hear his reminiscences of being a kid being on the set of this film. And then we have a Frank Jang and Rick Myers commentary. So Andy Lau dubbed his own voice. That's something I learned. That was very rare at this time, right? Chow Yun-fat used to do that. I know there are others who used to do that, but it wasn't super common at the time. And Andy Lau did it in this and in The Last Blood. This was Rick Myers' introduction to Wong Jing and Andy Lau. So he talks a lot about like how he first saw this movie, coming to love it, Andy Lau's talents. They do a really good analysis of Wong Jing's talent and the way he combines like emotion, exploitation, like really well done stuff with really over the top pervy stuff, and like what makes his style very unique and what makes him like why he's a very successful filmmaker too. Like, what is it about what he does that strikes a chord with the public and makes people want to go and see his films and makes them unique and gives him a solid voice as a filmmaker? It's a really interesting analysis. They talk about, I mean, I thought this was a really interesting thing. They just talk about how it was like a physically complicated shoot because like they're going to Greece, but they're not just going to Greece. There's like shooting scenes on a boat, which means you need to get the camera rig on the boat. And this is before you had a little digital camera that you can just, you know, put on like a little rig that you would walk away. Like, you know what I mean? You have like a freaking camera, you have to like a film camera. You got to get it on the boat. Maybe you need a tripod or some other thing to make it steady. And like, and then there's some stuff in Greece where they're filming on an island, like at the top of this mountain. So you have to like bring all the equipment to the mountain and then haul it all, or to the island and haul it up the mountain. And like, it's really interesting kind of look at that. There's a really interesting story about Long Arm of the Law in here because one of the actors in this is also in Long Arm of the Law, which is one of my favorite movies ever. I'm so freaking excited that is coming out from 88 Films in about a month or so. And then there's an anime reference in this movie that I never would have caught. Frank talks about how that anime show was dubbed into Cantonese, I think, or subtitled or whatever, and shown on TV in Hong Kong. So it was very popular at the time. And so there's a reference to that within the film. So it's Magic Crystal. I really, really, really enjoyed this film. Some people have said that the 88 Films transfer, this is, like I said, this is the Region A Vinegar Syndrome release. There's a Region B 88 Films release. Some people have said that the transfer is much better on the Region B release. I've seen a few comparisons side by side on Twitter. Okay, so here's the thing. Watching this on my TV, I have a 59-inch TV. It's like a decently sized TV. It was fine. And I thought it looked fantastic, and I loved watching it. I thought the audio was well. There's like a little bit in the beginning where the audio is like a little fuzzy and blown out. I don't know if like that part of the audio, it just wasn't well preserved, or maybe they didn't put as much effort into like remastering that, or I don't really know. I don't know what kind of resources they have for these films. Like, I want to give the benefit of the doubt where I can. 99% of this movie I thought sounded freaking incredible, and I thought looked fantastic. There are one or two scenes where you can see like some scratches on the print or something like that, but that stuff doesn't really bother me, to be perfectly honest with you. I've seen a lot of films on celluloid in movie theaters. I still go to do that these days, and you know, that's just what happens to film. And you could digitally remove it, you could touch it up, you could make it more pristine. I know that. I think 88 Films has done that with their release, but it didn't bother me. And I'm happy that I have this release. And so my name is Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Huge shout out to the patrons for sending this to me. This is like, I mean, honestly, this is probably going to be in my top 5 Hong Kong first watches of the year, because I'd never seen this film before. And in terms of films that are new to me that I had never seen before, this is one of my favorites of the year. Like, I freaking love this movie. Like, 5 stars from me. So we'll see you next time.